The big waves of free agency have come and gone. How did they impact the NFL draft landscape? We're exploring that today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who make Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase.
Joseph, we have a very important landmark that we did not acknowledge that we need to.
The Ides of March?
It's a birthday.
Oh, is it the rebirth of this podcast?
It is happy birthday to Locked On NFL Scouting, who turned 1 on Friday.
Wow.
From our first show with the rebrand.
Very cool.
Happy birthday to us.
Yeah, we're 1. It feels like we're older than that, but we're 1.
Well, the Draft Dudes brand is much older than 1.
Yeah.
But this structure is 1 year old as of Friday. So we are off and running. Our first show was about the tampering period last year. We did all our tampering period stuff at the beginning of last week. And now we're going to talk about how the tampering period and the start of free agency has impacted the NFL draft landscape as we shift gears here on this program into high gear with draft work over the course of the next 38 days, 10 hours, 31 minutes, and 1 second from right now, according to tankathon.com.
Wow. Soon.
Here we go.
Soon.
Battle of the boards this year. We're bringing it back. We didn't do it last year.
We'll see. We'll see where we get. You know what I mean?
We should do that as a YouTube live stream. So it's not within it'd be impossible to do battle of the boards within a structure of.
Yeah. Ross Jackson will get us out of here, man. Yeah. We won't make it to our second birthday. All right. So free agency, the NFL draft, the landscape is ever shifting. We want to lead off this conversation with top 10 dominoes. And I guess the first domino is that the Bears are picking a quarterback at 1. They traded away Justin Fields to the Steelers. Welcome to Chicago, Caleb Williams, presumably.
So Caleb Williams, presumably, I think it's a safe assumption. Stepping into Chicago, franchise that's never had a 4,000-yard passer, and he's going to have DJ Moore. He's going to have Keenan Allen. He's going to have a revamped running game with DeAndre Swift. He's going to have Cole Kmet. Am I forgetting somebody?
A defense that's had some improvements as well.
A lot of investments in the offensive line. And then, by the way, another top 10 pick waiting in the wings.
Yeah.
For Chicago.
I know that the Williams-Fields debate was hard for Chicago, but it is over. What's that?
Oh, yeah. It was hard for their fans.
Yeah. It was like a civil war. Yeah. They had problems.
I don't think it was hard for the team at all.
No, for the fans. I think it was very split. But you got to be excited about resetting at quarterback, having your pick of guy at 1, and then as we stay within the theme of top 10 dominoes, you got that number 9 pick. And that could be more offensive line help. There could be some good value there. You could get some defense as well. I think you're flexible. You could trade back. You got to feel pretty good if you're a Bears fan.
You say, if they want to go offensive line, you've got a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah.
And you should not have a hot and heavy run off the board before that in a deep tackle class. I'd be hoping somebody gets desperate for somebody else at one of the more leaner position groups up top, whether that's QB4 is going to go before 9, right? I mean, not to get into quarterbacks.
Yeah,
now.
We'll get to that. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Wide receiver, maybe.
You could see wide receivers going 4, 5, and 6. You could see it.
So top 10 dominoes. Arizona, they have generally been perceived as a best available player, which everybody's assuming is Marvin Harrison Jr. There is a world and a realm in which they moved out of 4. If New England sticks and picks a quarterback, that Arizona gets an offer that's too good to be true, I'd consider it. If I were Arizona, which is just how far away they are and the resources they need. But then you get into Chargers desperately need a wide receiver.
Yeah. Big time.
Darius Davis, is he the 2? Right now, is Josh Palmer the 2?
Are we assuming Quentin Johnston's the 1? Because that's a big yikes.
Maybe Josh Palmer's the 1 then.
Josh Palmer might be the 1. Yeah, and then it's Darius Davis versus Quentin Johnston for the 2.
The Giants?
Wide receiver.
Wide receiver feels like a very I guess the way that wide receiver's not it is if a quarterback fell into their laps that they absolutely loved, which I think is what happened when we did the combine mock.
Yeah.
Drake Maye, I believe.
Dude, that's so tough. That starts with New England probably sticking and picking Marvin Harrison Jr., right? If there's a path to a quarterback falling to the Giants, I think that's domino 1. Pats stick and pick Marvin Harrison Jr.
Or trading out.
Well, the problem with that is a team comes up for a quarterback.
Yeah, which I think would be McCarthy over Maye. And we've heard that Maye might be the one that slips a little bit.
So then you'd have to.
Then you'd have wide receivers at 4 and 5 with Arizona with Marvin Harrison Jr. and the Chargers get whatever pick of Odunze or Neighbors that they want, and then Maye's there for you at 6.
Man,
I'm saying I wouldn't rule that out of the. I wouldn't say New England has to stick and pick for that to happen for them.
Okay, so there's your path. I think getting another receiver earlier helps the possibility of a quarterback falling to 6.
Sure. Yeah, I think the math obviously is boosted in that regard. What's Tennessee going to do?
They got to pick a tackle, right? If they get OT1, they got to. I mean, there's other things that they can do, but this tackle situation's not my favorite. I'm sure Titans fans are mad at me for saying that, but
well, no, I think it's totally fair to point out because they've already moved on from Dillard, right? It was a disastrous contract. They moved on after him from 1 year and took a bath on the contract, but I think it was the right move to move on. The skill group that they addressed the interior offensive line with Cushenberry. They are technically another potential wide receiver spot too. Now, obviously, they paid what they paid to Calvin Ridley, and DeAndre Hopkins is here under contract this year.
Those guys are both like north of 30, right?
Right. Well, yeah, Ridley's 20, 29 going on 30.
Yeah, I think this is his age 30 season.
But his he will be 30 in December.
Okay, so I call this his age 29 season. Yeah.
29 season. Yeah. I wouldn't assume it's open and shut for them for offensive tackle. I think that's probably going to be the best alignment of need and value on the board at that stage with what's in front of them. And they've alleviated some of that need at wide receiver with Calvin Ridley. So I think that's helpful for them. I just try to be cognizant of what the coach said, in the pre-draft process thus far.
About the offense and timing and routes and all that. Is that
we need to get faster. We need to get more explosive.
The other part of this is Minnesota's moving up, right? Like they are moving up. And so I think let me set this on the table because I want to get into Minnesota moving up and where they can move up to. Mm-hmm. And then this idea of 5 quarterbacks. And if Denver is realistically a spot for a quarterback, I want to get into that here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with me. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you could still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA for a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer.
Should I just log off? You said be sure to stick with me.
You know what I mean? Sometimes you get in this mode. We both have solo podcasts. I thought about the entire time I talked about Robinhood. It's like Kyle's going to feel like I just made that. Like,
I should just leave.
I knew that was going to happen. That was very predictable. I'm sorry. I recorded Locked On Bills before this. You know what I mean? So you don't have to do the ad reads. You know what I mean? So you don't have to put yourself in that position.
Don't put that on me.
Oh, yeah. You know, Kyle, why don't you do some ad reads, man? Why don't you step up to the plate? Somebody thought you were amazing. They thought your cadence was, they commented on it. It was amazing cadence.
I do my best.
Yeah. Well, it's also somebody who doesn't like me. I went back and read all their comments that they made on the channel. It's like, okay, you obviously just don't like me. That's fine. We get it. We know that. We know that there's some. You're gonna have a one of us that you're gonna prefer more than the other. We're aware of that.
Yeah, especially with our fan bases.
Right, but it is nice to see the caveat. Your fan base
is gonna objectively like me and vice versa.
Right, there is that caveat. They're like, well, for a Dolphins guy, you like Kyle, right? Or that for a Bills guy, Joe's not bad, right? He's not the worst person in the whole world. Got a good last name. Yeah, all right.
Minnesota.
So that trade happened while we were recording a podcast last week, so we got some like very authentic reaction to that. But they now have 11 and they have 23. They didn't do this because they're not moving up for a quarterback. So it then just becomes about what spot. I know that New England's a hot spot, but tell me why the Chargers shouldn't be a hot spot. And if the Giants, it's the Tennessee, Atlanta, all these teams should be in play to make this move.
Here's the attractive thing, I think, for the Chargers. What have we generally perceived to be the two biggest positions of need for the Chargers?
Perceived as offensive tackle and wide receiver.
So if you go to 11, what are you going to be in a really good position to draft?
A tackle.
And then if you land at 23, what are you firmly going to be in the second tier of wide receivers in? Or second tier of their position on it.
You can get Brian Thomas and Olu Fashanu or something like that.
Right. So I think that for the Chargers' perspective, that's the attractive sell of addressing for an offensive-minded coach who's coming in and completely remodeling what everything looks like. For that team, the DNA of that offense is going to change. Having a double dip in the top 24 picks where you're right in the sweet spot of where the value should be, I think that's an attractive option. I think the argument for the Patriots at 3 is, well, our coach came out and said we got all this cash to burn. We're going to spend. We're going to bring in talent, and their hallmark marquee wide receiver addition is KJ Osborne, right? They struck out on a bunch of dudes.
It's just not an attractive place, right?
More of the same. The Patriot way. Nothing's wrong. More of the same. Anyway, you're right. And I think that for New England, you're starting at square one. Do you have news?
No, I just took the time to look at the Patriots depth chart, courtesy of our friends over at Our Lads, and knowing that they had like
why'd you say like
top 3 cap space, right?
They were like top 2 cap space. Yeah, I think they were behind just Washington.
What do we have to show for this?
Jacoby
Antonio
Brissett,
Gibson,
Chukwuma Okorafor, Austin Hooper. They brought back Hunter Henry
and Wayne, so that was good.
And they got Duggar on the transition tag. And Sion Takitaki, of course.
Kyle, we may have only signed one starter. Chukwuma Okorafor. Now, I guess KJ Osborne will be one of their million receivers. That
Brissett's going to start, right?
Oh, Kyle Crabbs.
They're going to slow play whoever they get in the boat. And Brissett
what are we doing? Where are the dynamic players for the Patriots?
Nick Leverett. They got Nick Leverett.
The most significant thing for the New England Patriots is going to be Christian Gonzalez and Matthew Judon being healthy.
Right. Well, I guess the argument, we're not going to turn this into a Patriots bass session, but the argument was, well, we lost a bunch of one-score games. We were close. Getting back your key players will be helpful. And that's fine. But
you know what's fun is like winning by multiple scores. That's really cool. You know how you do that? You have like lots of good players that are dynamic and hard for other teams to deal with. And then you don't play everything 10-7 and 13-10. You know, like, get out of here, man. All right, so but it is insane to me that New England's not going to stick and pick at 3, a quarterback.
Well, the word of warning here is 2021. You had guys climbing over each other for second and third options in the draft class.
Okay, that's a good cautionary tale, but like, what about the 2 a year?
Okay, do you have conviction one way or another that this is a class of 2020 or a class of 2020?
Oh, I don't have those convictions. How about the Josh Allen year in 18 where it's Baker, right? Darnold, Allen, the Bills traded up, and then it was Rosen and Jackson.
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. Like, if you feel like these guys give you a
Watson
chance.
And Mahomes.
And they went like 10 and 11.
But it's situational. Right? And we've said that about the guy at the top with Caleb Williams. We didn't think Caleb Williams was a transcendent player that you could put in any situation across the league, no matter how good or bad it is, and he would guarantee you success.
Are we going to assume that it's Caleb and Jayden are the top 2? So now we're talking about Drake Maye or JJ McCarthy.
That's the assumption that I am making, yes.
Does it matter which quarterback's available for New England at 3?
No.
So we feel like there's multiple places that Minnesota can move up, right? Our objective here is kind of talk about quarterbacks in this segment.
They could go to 3, they could go to 4, they could go to 5. But I guess the challenge is the lower and deeper in you get, then you do get into a you-know-what contest with Denver, and you get into a you-know-what contest with potentially the Raiders.
They can't outbid you for the deal. They can't do it.
Right. So you just have to beat the best other offer, and guaranteeing a second first-round pick allows Minnesota to do that. That's their trump card. Is, look, you might get offered 3 1s. Nobody's giving you 2 this year.
Yeah. And the other X factor here, and certainly Minnesota surely has some belief that there will be a quarterback that they like, but you have to have a quarterback that you like enough to go get, right?
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota doesn't make this move, to me, if they're not comfortable.
They don't have the conviction.
Yeah, there's going to be some convictions. I don't know what the Raiders and Denver are thinking, but like, there's people out there that think 5 quarterbacks can go. And who is the 5th quarterback? Bo Nix? Is it Spencer Rattler? Is it Michael Penix? Are we going to do this?
It's a weird world to live in, right? Where there's appeal with each one of those guys, but the resumes, I think, have enough significant holes where the Broncos are going to stick and pick at 12 and pick QB5. That feels like a first-class ticket to a Mac Jones type experience all over again for a different team.
They have Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci as their quarterbacks.
Yeah, so they need one. They don't have a 2. So they pick at 12, and then they pick again in, I believe, the 70s is when their next pick comes through on the board. 76.
They should be talking about trading down if they can.
Trade down candidate, yep.
I mean, if they're going to pick one of those quarterbacks,
you can't do it at 12. Now, the other side of that coin is, well, if you have enough conviction to take the quarterback in the first round, you should just have the conviction to pick them wherever in the first round.
Yeah, I saw this with EJ Manuel. The Bills moved back and traded for got EJ Manuel.
Yeah.
You're moving back for your quarterback. That ain't good. That ain't good.
That's a flag, right?
It's a flag, brother. That's a flag.
I guess if you look beyond Minnesota, Denver, Las Vegas, 11 through 13, is there anywhere else that you look at as a spot where a quarterback could have their name called the rest of the way? I don't really think so, unless it's a trade out candidate for a team that's coming back in for a guy who slides to the end of the round. But I don't know about you and how you perceive it.
Yeah, I see it the same way. I think after we get through that Denver, Vegas cluster, Minnesota, somebody's coming back into the first round to get a quarterback. And I'm sure there's some teams that would love to move out. So you could see that, but I think that's kind of your path.
And I think the two doors that were somewhat open have been closed in recent days with quarterback transactions, where Sam Howell gets traded as part of a pick swap to Seattle. Right? They've kind of been like flippant with Geno a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he gets dealt as part of this day 3 pick swap. And then Pittsburgh obviously remakes the entire quarterback. Props to Pittsburgh. They are paying a guy vet minimum, and they traded a conditional 6th, and they got 2 guys that were better than the incumbent who was on the roster last year. So Pittsburgh at 20 and Seattle at 16 were kind of the 2 middle ones that you felt, well, they don't have a long-term commitment, or they don't necessarily know what they have. Maybe they could be in play just based on some of the Seattle language and how they were talking about Geno. But I think there's enough competition in both of those rooms now where you're probably pretty comfortable with what you got.
All right, we've talked top 10. We've talked quarterbacks. We're going to get to the other stuff here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with us. You shouldn't have to worry when you're looking to buy tickets for your next big event. Well, you don't have to, because Game Time is here, and it's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer deals on last-minute tickets, all-in prices. They give you a view from your seat and a best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. The app is awesome. It's easy to navigate. They give you flash deals, and I love this. When you buy a ticket with Game Time, they send it right to your phone. You don't have to dig through emails to find it. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
The other stuff. Now, looking at the changing NFL draft landscape for 2024, based off of what has happened in the last week with trades, acquisitions, players that are still out there, I do want to cheat and go back to the top 10 for just a second. The New York Jets, team we have not talked about. They get a big contract done with Tyron Smith, worth up to the most famous words in early March NFL Twitter, up to $20 million. Believe the base there was set at 6.5.
Yep.
A lot of conditional availability. I think it's 38% is when the first conditions kick in on some of that conditional money that he has of $13.5 million of available extra funds. You pair that with Morgan Moses, who the team trades for. You get a couple of long-term veteran 10-plus year tackles in the NFL to go with what your interior offensive line looks like with Tippmann, who looks like a successful draft pick for them, and hopefully Vera Tucker can stay healthy. It's a bit of a big risk, though, but I don't think that's necessarily a first-round problem for the Jets. They're just a really interesting team because they've really opened themselves up with those 2 tackle transactions to be in play for a lot more than just, well, we need to draft the best offensive line available for Aaron Rodgers.
How much would they love for one of those 3 receivers to be there at 10? Right now, their second and third receivers are Jason Brownlee and Xavier Gibson.
They're going to make a move, I think, beforehand, whether it's Mike Williams or otherwise. I think they'll be in a position to make a splash at wide receiver with a vet. I think
they're more flexible.
I think that's a Brock Bowers spot.
You do?
Well, your tight end was on the board for them last year.
Yeah.
Their short list was Maye, McDonald, and one other player that is escaping me at the moment. But Maye was kind of the surprise everybody found out was in the discussion for the Jets. And they've cleared out some of that tight end room from last year anyway. So I would not be surprised, even if the wide receivers get there. They've apparently had eyes on tight end for several seasons now.
Does Javon Kinlaw and Lecky Fotu take you out of a defensive tackle conversation? Someone to go with Quinyon Williams?
It should not. But what is it? Are they going to draft Byron Murphy there?
The point being, this isn't an offensive tackle or bust situation like maybe we thought it was before free agency. I'd say their needs are much bigger at receiver and defensive tackle, and they can get their X factor in Brock Bowers.
What do you think of the Colts? No, go ahead. I'll ask you about the Colts after your bullet point.
Yeah, one of my big thoughts is we've seen the free agent dominoes fall. Is this stretch of 13 to 25, there are offensive line landmines galore. Vegas, I think they need an entire right side of their offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
The Saints, they could use a left guard / left tackle. Seattle, they need help on that interior offensive line. Cincinnati still needs a right tackle. They're going to probably draft their right tackle at 18. Pittsburgh, center for sure. Miami, guard for sure. Dallas needs a lot on the offensive line. Green Bay. There are so many spots. Just in that stretch, not to mention what's before and after, the offensive line are going to go, but I think that's going to be just a massive run, 13 to 25 on these offensive linemen.
I'm glad you said that. So where do you think, how many go before 13? That's the mystery question for how robust the run gets. Yeah. And then I think how happy these teams are with who they're pulling.
What's funny about that is I can make an argument for as few as 2.
Right. As good as the tackle class is, it's almost like the depth of how good it is hurts some of these tackles in the top 10 because teams might say, we'll come back and get Graham Barton the second time around or come up and get, whether it's Amarius Mims or Latham or whoever ends up sliding a little bit, we can circle back to.
And the Giants are paying Andrew Thomas. They just signed a Jermaine Illuminir. They still have Evan Neal. I don't know, man. I don't know if they're going to be a tackle spot.
Michael Schmidt's in year 2. Like what they gotta, it's if they're going to try to draft and develop, you really have, and they signed John Runyon.
Yeah.
I don't think they're an offensive line spot at all.
And what the Giants and Jets have done with the offensive line, it opens this up because I think Tennessee's an offensive line candidate. The Chargers, if they move back, I think they're an offensive line candidate. I don't know. Why couldn't they stick and pick one? It's not unfathomable to believe that, right?
They should be the team that trades back, and then at 11, they should pick Jackson Powers Johnson.
The Chargers?
Yeah. Lindsley's retirement. They just have to process it post June 1st for salary cap purposes. He restructured all to a minimum salary to carry as little of a cap hit as possible between now and June 1st before they can process that. Don't you feel like that's a Harbaugh?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
We want to come out and run the ball, right? Like you got Sawyer and Zion Johnson as your interior guards. Right now you got Brent Lang, Brendan Jamies, and Jordan McFadden as your other interior options. You go back to 11, you stay in front of that offensive line run.
Yeah.
You can guarantee you get, I think you can at least work with Pipkins. He has some good film on his tape. He just wasn't good last year.
And did you see some metrics on Pipkins where when I saw a chart that was pressures versus difficulty of assignment? Yeah. And that relationship actually told a good story for Pipkins because he had a rough year. Yeah. But he also had a murderer's row of he had tough assignments for sure.
And he's a better run blocker than pass protector anyway.
And you still have Sawyer too. Sawyer played his best football at tackle.
So that for me would be a really exciting option for Powers Johnson, but not a tackle.
Right. But you need help in both spots. So for as much as it seems like wide receiver for the Chargers, it's offensive line's not out of the weeds here. Not to mention they could use some help on defense.
Right. In spite of their restructuring of all their edge guys.
Right.
So Chargers, Tennessee with the tackles makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if Chicago just ends up going with an edge rusher. instead of another tackle. They seem to like their young tackles. And obviously Darnell Wright with a top 10 pick last year at right tackle, but the left tackle is kind of open-ended. I wouldn't, the other names that they have there wouldn't stop me from investing there. But if they're trying to maximize that pick, I would not be surprised if it was an edge rusher and not a tackle. We just got done talking about the Jets. So now you're at 11 and you maybe have 2. I think you're right.
It could be as few as 2. I think 2 is the number.
I think it is no more than 3.
Yeah, 3 would be the most.
Yeah. So that's really fascinating to get into Vegas through Green Bay, that third of the draft. And then what does that domino effect look like for wide receivers, which is a really good, but there's a definitive top tier or perceived definitive top tier. What does that look like for corners, where like Quinyon Mitchell's been really the only guy who has passed every test with flying colors.
So I think he's in play for Atlanta at 8.
Yep. I think so too. I certainly think that means no linebackers or safeties at all. What does that mean for the interior defensive line? Like you just mentioned, like Byron, but if you're getting this big, hot and heavy offensive tackle run through 12 picks, 13 through 25, what does that mean for Johnny Newton, who maybe doesn't have the universal love and had a foot issue that prevented him from testing?
Come on to 28, Johnny. We'll take it.
Might have been 21. It's gonna be hard. I think what really the point that I drive home, you talk about pick 28 with obviously Buffalo and pick 21 Miami. I'm gonna have a lot of options I like for my spot. I don't know about like how robust you think your options are gonna be, but
not very robust, Kyle Crabbs.
Just because it's so deep in the round.
Yeah,
but you don't need offensive line.
You wouldn't think.
You gotta love thinking that about half of the round.
Yeah. All of the
go buck wild on offensive linemen.
Give me offensive linemen, all the quarterbacks. Let's take 7 or 8 of those. I mean, I'm hoping that the Bills can find some value on the defensive line. I know that a lot of people are pounding the wide receiver thing.
Corner in play for them?
I don't think so.
No, I know Bedford's been great, but I know just beyond that, Trey White, they moved on from. Didn't they lose Dane Jackson too?
Yeah, they still have Rasul Douglas and Kyrie Elam. So I think I don't think 28. Yeah,
Elam.
They're going to draft some guy in the 5th round and wind up be a starter in 2 years. Yeah, we're good.
It's the McDermott formula is alive and well, right?
Yeah, we think.
At least it's not Josh Norman.
Hey, he was on the Bills last year. He was on the practice squad at the end.
I'm aware. Yeah.
He's coming back. Come on. We can't do a season without him.
All right. That's going to do it for us here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He's Joe Marino. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We appreciate you guys checking out the show. Happy birthday to us. The show turned 1 over the weekend. We hope you will come back and celebrate the next year and many more ahead of it. Come on back and see us again tomorrow.